Hi, I'm a higher ed CMO and I have a confession to make. Please do not open the junk drawers in any room of my house. Why am I telling you this? You're probably asking. Because today's episode, we're going to be talking about the junk drawer that is a higher ed website. I am talking to the absolutely marvelous Georgy Cohen. She has spent more than 20 years leading digital strategy and content strategy initiatives for higher education, publications, and nonprofits. Her experience includes stints leading web strategy at Tufts University and Suffolk University, and serving as vice president of digital strategy at the digital agency OHO, as well as running her own independent consultancies. I love talking with Georgie. She has so much wisdom about content strategy, the web, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
The whole world is front doors now. Like, there are no doors. We're just like floating around, and people are finding information through all these ways. And our content as existing, if there's 5 different versions of it out there, like the wrong version could be pulled as a response to somebody's query.
You're listening to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO with Jaime Hunt, your source for insight and inspiration on the issues shaping higher ed marketing. From AI and branding to enrollment strategy and leadership, each episode explores the ideas, challenges, and opportunities facing today's marketing leaders. Let's get into it. Hey, Georgie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. I feel like I'm president of the Georgy Cohen fan club and have been a member of said club for like over a decade. I'm so excited to have you on the show again.
Yes, it was. I think last time it was a standing session. We were at Cup Wrap, and it was like the whole like hallway. It's like, hey, come over here. We're gonna stand here and do the thing. It was like, whoa, it's like guerrilla podcasting. But now we're like in our offices and sitting down.
We're very serious.
Very serious.
Yes,
extremely serious.
This is an intentional conversation. I should go into my like NPR voice. You posted something so intriguing on LinkedIn that I had to talk to you about it. You wrote about decluttering video.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Do you mean like taking a video and decluttering like actual video, or decluttering how much video? What do you mean? I need to know.
So like one of my bad habits, like as many of us could probably say, is like, getting hooked in like reels or whatever and just watching videos. So the algorithm knows you better than you know yourself. So I get fed like decluttering videos of like people who are, decluttering their houses or whatever. And there's this one person who has been entering my feed, and that's the person who inspired me to make that post, because this person's house is like ginormous, and it looks pristine, and she opens a closet and there's like 20 shelves, and there's like 80 boxes and whatever. But like, she's on this decluttering journey, like every day, like a 365-day decluttering journey. And then every day she just takes like one box or like one shelf on the cupboard and goes through it. What I thought was interesting about that is that, if I just walked into her house, I would just be like, the counters are like white and pristine, like there's no visible clutter, like everything looks really great. But then she takes out this like, bin, and it's like her kids' baby shoes from 10 years ago. It's like,
Right.
And she's on, she's like, this is very emotional for me. I have a very hard time letting go of like my kid. My kids are like, they're like 10 or whatever. I have a very hard time letting go of my kids' stuff from when they're like their art and all this stuff. And I'm like, I think that's very interesting. And it just made me think about something I think a lot about, which is content on higher ed websites, and the idea of like content debt and just dealing with it, and how things can look okay, but they're actually not. And, just her process of just being not, just taking it bit by bit, little by little. She has a partner who is one of those guys who's very like emotionally attached to chargers from 5 phones ago, from 2008. And there's like a little basket of them. But she's very patient with him, and like, we're not ready to get rid of that right now. But we're going to get rid of this, and making those decisions and just being thoughtful about it. And I thought there was interesting parallels to when I work with schools and they're sort of, reckoning with, the state of their websites.
It's I love that I was wrong in both ways about what you meant by decluttering videos. I was reading it incredibly literally. This makes so much sense. I'm sorry to my dear husband, but we have, I think, 3 bins of cords, and some of them are probably 25 years old and wouldn't even work with any modern tool.
They're emotionally load bearing. I get it. I
Yes.
get it.
And like empty boxes from like the iPhone 2 or whatever.
Oh yeah, it's a
Um,
good box. You can't get rid of a
right.
good box.
I could make a diorama with this, I say 20 years later. So ran into Georgie, or like became familiar with who you were, when I was the director of web strategy at Radford. So I'm going to feel real triggered by this whole conversation, because like the idea of like put it on the website as being the solution for higher ed. And you recently wrote
Mhm.
about that. Tell me more. Why is that such a problem? And I'll sit over here and twitch.
Well, I think the idea of, and I've been nerding around on the web since the dawn of time, since redacted years ago. And, it's great because it's so easy to put information out there. And it's so terrible because it's so easy to put information out there. And, I think over time, especially, when the web emerged, people sort of adapt, I think, kind of like a publish first, ask questions never kind of mindset to it. And
Yep.
so you're like, oh, someone needs that thing, or the people need to see this thing. I'm going to put a page up, or God forbid, upload a PDF, send it out there, and move on. And you're on to the next thing on your list, but that's still out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's not just individual pages; it's whole sites on
Mm-hmm.
whole different CMS platforms. Like it's not just like the website and the pages, but also kind of like the digital ecosystem. And you think about, I'm sure you've seen universities where each school has their own CRM, or,
Yes.
each department has its own CMS, or things like that are also a form of that kind of like, we've heard of like technical debt and content debt, where you just have all these sort of like unmanaged sort of bloat happening out there. And, as we've been, building and publishing and creating, there hasn't really been an attendant corresponding attention to organizing and pruning and
Mm-hmm.
aligning to our strategic goals and consolidating, because that's hard work, and digital teams are not staffed for that work. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's rare to find a team that is staffed for the work that they need to do. And as a consultant over the past few years, I feel like I've seen more people coming to me with those problems are coming home to roost. And it's acknowledgement that things have gotten really bad, and people don't know what to do about it. It's like the content debt collectors are starting to call, and that sounds like bad SERPs, bad UX, bad or conflicting or outdated info on the website that's causing problems. Team members, I mean, some of the stuff's still being maintained in some fashion that's putting strain, and it's degrading the brand. And so all these things are happening, and a lot of it can be traced to just kind of put it on the website mentality, or just get it out there. But we didn't think about, well, okay, but now what? And how do we acknowledge, like live with that, not just sort of move on from it?
I just think of all the sites that I worked with when I was at Radford, the director of rep strategy, and there were, I think, either 3 or 4 career services websites on different CMSs when I got there
Mm-hmm.
in 2010, because like an intern would design one and then they'd graduate and nobody'd have the login, so they'd just create
Mm-hmm.
another career
Yeah,
services website.
make a new
That's,
one.
16 years ago, but all of that kind of haunts you when somebody's doing a search for a date or a deadline, and they get a PDF from 5 years ago and
Mm-hmm.
ahead of the more recent content, and all of
Mm-hmm.
that. And I'm really curious about your thought. Like, what does content debt look like on a website?
Content debt is basically like, imagine if if your website's like a boat and you're trying to keep it on the surface of the water, and content that is just this weight that's pulling it
Mm,
down, and just trying to, and you're trying to stay upright, but you're just kind of sinking down. And it could be, comprised of so many things, like news articles going back to the 2000s, because it's news and it's important, and we never really came up with an archival strategy.
mm-hmm.
Microsites for long past conferences and symposia from 2018 and whatnot. I think honestly, I see some challenges with intranets, or sort of internal facing sections of
Mm-hmm.
websites where people tend to just, it's a good motivation to say, let's separate internal and external content. Like, that's really important. But then they, put all this like UX thinking and, think about the experience of this like prospect facing website and and then all the internal content's just like in a pile festering
Mm-hmm.
and not being maintained. So that's also creating some content debt. So, I feel like, it's a lot of those. And like I said, like kind of like, the different sites that pop up, different platforms, it hurts everything around it because, like you said, you're going to have redundant information, confusing information. You're going to have things that are consuming resources, whether it's man hours or computing power, energy, server space, like all those things add up. Hosting, money is being wasted. It's a huge efficiency concern as well. So it's not just like, gosh, that's a lot of content, but there's also these real sort of time and resources factors that are also being impacted by having all this stuff just lying around with no plan for it, or sometimes not even awareness of it. People don't even know necessarily what's on their domain all the time. So it's problematic.
Yeah. I back when I was more actively involved with web, so from 2010 to 2015,
Hmm.
the tools were good, but they weren't probably as advanced as they are now in terms
Hmm.
of like helping you see content aging or things like that.
Yep.
Where for somebody who's like, okay, I'm feeling really some kind of way listening to this, and now I'm really worried about what might be out there. Like, what do you recommend people? Where do you recommend people start looking, or what do you recommend that they do?
I really love this question because I think that it is such an overwhelming concept, this idea of like, hey, guess what, everything's terrible. Like, and I think one thing that I always try to emphasize in my work, because I'm often talking about things like governance and websites, and there's like huge, it's a mess. Like, everything I deal with is a mess, and no one wants to deal with a mess because it's hard and it's annoying and I'm scared and all those things. But and it's overwhelming to think like, gosh, where do I start, all those things. And I think that, I'm a big subscriber to the philosophy of like, just do one thing better. Like, pick the
Mm-hmm.
smallest, most discrete thing that can have the most impact on your bottom line. So really, like with all things, I'm always like, let strategy be your guide. Like, if you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to be more, okay, we're working on, our recruitment strategy. We need to, okay, let's look at that content. If it's like, okay, there's a lot's been happening with our programs, like, well, let's look at that content, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can use user research, and your analytics also help kind of zero in on this. You can look at your enrollment data, your donor data. Like, you can have those inputs to sort of help determine where to focus. But I'd be willing to, and I think those are good practices to undertake. But you might already know where those issues are. But just start in one place where it aligns to the broader needs of the institution. I think that's where we've historically gotten really led ourselves astray, is when we just kind of do stuff, but it's disconnected from, well, the institution's going this way and it has these needs and these priorities, but I'm doing this thingy over here, which is neat. It's like,
Yeah.
well, can we all move in the same direction? And I think that if you just pick one thing that is supporting the direction where there's need or there's opportunity or what have you, what's mission critical, start there. Maybe it's like, financial aid content is a hot mess often because it's all, Byzantine processes and
Mm-hmm.
requirements and things like that. And, or maybe it's that you have like 5 versions of program pages spread across your domain on, this site and that site, and the school site and the admissions site and all this stuff. Maybe it's just archiving all that news content. It's setting a date, working with your, special collections to create an offline archive of news content before 2024 or whatever. Like, those are all things that are discrete projects that could have a meaningful impact. So I think it's just important to sort of figure out where to start, use data and or strategy to inform that space. And we're all overworked, and there's a lot going on and there's no time. So just do one thing better and start there.
I love that. It feels like usually when I'm undertaking a really big task, my suspected ADHD is overwhelmed by the number of things in that task. Like if I'm going to clean my closet, oh, I have these drawers, I have these baskets, I have these shelves, I have these
Mm-hmm.
things hanging, I have these upper shelves. Like it just starting with, we're just going to go through the upper shelves today. You don't
Mm-hmm.
need to be overwhelmed by all the things. Just go through all the upper shelves today. I think that's really good advice because if you think about, I have talked to people who have literally millions of web pages. There's an institution in the United States who has 18.9 million pages on their website. I talk to people all the time who have like 75,000 pages. They have 300,000 pages. If you think about going through 300,000 pages, it will blindingly crush you. Like that just seems daunting. But if you, I love how you're saying like start with where the strategy is. Like get your admissions section all cleaned up. Get your program pages all cleaned up. Then start worrying about like the centers or the little research projects that like the faculty abandoned them after they moved on to a different project. So now you have all this outdated content out there, or fill in the blank.
And to your point about the tools being better now than they were, we have much better tools for kind of crawling and being able to sort of undertake that kind of like, inventory of what you have. And out of those 300,000 pages, there very well could be 100,000 of events or something that you can just lop off right away, right? But you're not going to know that unless you have the capability to, and content management systems are getting more advanced, be able to say like content before a certain date, things like that. So we have more ability now to understand what we have and be aware of it. And I honestly think that's one of the first, if you don't know where to start, just kind of doing that, like, just that intake, that inventory, like, what do I have? Because you might not even know what you have. And then getting that kind of insight around it's like, oh, well, all these events, there's like, a cajillion events from this, from whenever, I can just lop that up. There's some easy wins out there in all likelihood. So kind of doing that high level inventory just to sort of like understand the landscape, that could create overwhelm, but I think it's also going to expose some easy wins while also helping identify some areas of, okay, like I could focus here, I could focus there.
Back in the day, I gave site owners spreadsheets with like all the pages of their site. And then like I asked them to once a year go through those and identify which ones still need to exist. Now, probably 20% of them actually did that. Where does governance fit into this? I had no governance like policy. I could be like, well, you're fired because you didn't go through your site. Like, how does governance fit into this? Because I suspect a lot of the stuff that's sitting out there was put on by decentralized folks.
Yeah. I mean, I think governance, it just goes hand in hand with what we're talking about in this conversation, because governance would, I worked with a school at my previous agency where they had like more than 300 microsites, right? And so, part of the it was like a website redesign project. So part of the work is like, okay, obviously we're going to like, there's some that we're just getting rid of because they're from those events from 2015 and things like that. But then there's some that's like, okay, we're going to consolidate those within this college site and this over here. And this actually goes to admissions and what have you. But then the governance is saying, okay, we're moving away from a microsite model. This committee, these people over here are the only ones who can decide that a microsite is okay. And generally the criteria will be, executive, whatever, XYZ. So, it's setting that policy that says like only these people can create or authorize like a microsite, for example, or some kind of like subdomain experience. And so that, you go through the IA and the web work to kind of fix like that previous state. Then you create policy and process. And a lot of it's just like roles or responsibility. It's like give people a role, define their responsibilities, create capacity and expectation, provide guidance to fulfill that. And, having people who are doers, people who are approvers, people who are decision makers, people who are owners, right? I feel like ownership sometimes a dirty word in higher ed. Like, we're consensus driven. It's like, okay, but we need to decide something at the end of the day. Someone needs to own these decisions. And I think part of the heart of, I think, of governance is having people empowered to fulfill certain roles. And I think having, if we're talking about content debt and how do we, deal with this, I think it's having policies and place and guidelines that say like, here's how we do things, but also people who are empowered to make those decisions and technology that's aligned so like not everyone can just create whatever they want, like the permissions and all that sort of aligns to that. So you have the policy, the people, and the platform all working together to support the desired state.
I'm really curious about your thoughts around how this abundance of potentially outdated content could impact results in like a ChatGPT search that a prospective student is doing, or somebody using Perplexity to research schools. Like, what's the impact of having all these microsites that are outdated, or all this content that's 15 years old? Like, how would that impact that?
The chatbots are not that smart. They're not smart enough to discern between all of this content. As something's been around for 10 years, well, maybe it's pretty authoritative, right? And I think that, I'm doing a lot of work working with clients nowadays on AEO and just thinking about this question. And I think one of the most important things that you can do if you're thinking about how to improve the viability of your content as a resource for traditional search engines, AI chatbots, all that, is to tackle your content debt, to look at your content and do that assessment and have that moment and work on that. Because I feel like we're moving away from, the metaphor, like the website, like the house, like the homepage is the front door, and it's like the whole world is front doors now. Like there are no doors. We're just like floating around, and people are finding information through all these ways. And our content as existing, if there's 5 different versions of it out there, like the wrong version could be pulled as a response to somebody's query. And so we have to think holistically and real in a systems thinking kind of way, like not just like my little area, but what else is out there. That's why I always advocate for that sort of like ecosystem level, like looking at like what's everything that we have going on and doing that inventory so that it's like, okay, we have 5 versions of program pages, we have this, we have that. Like we need to create canonical versions of things, we need to eliminate these sort of redundant entities, like all that, so that we're able to focus and say, this is the answer. This is the one thing that says what the process is, or what the guidelines are, or what majors we have, or what, whatever the question is. Because it's like you're going from, it could be 100% certainty that there's one source and they're going to pull that, to just, maybe they'll get the right one, maybe they won't. You're just like lessening your chances. And, of course there's like Reddit and there's other sources out there, but in terms of what you can 100% control, it's your website, and your website, your .edu, like you have so much domain authority, and you're just like wasting that opportunity if you're just not minding the store and just letting content kind of be there, and who knows what's out there.
As you were talking about that, I was thinking about what you said about ownership. And I think that if people think about ownership with a little bit different lens, it's not like you own it so you get to decide it necessarily, as it is you're the steward of that content.
Yes, stewardship.
If that content's messed up, you are responsible that it's messed up. And I think if you reframe that from like ownership means I get to decide, instead ownership means I'm responsible for this being correct, accurate, necessary, fill in the blank. That's, I think, a mentality shift that I think people have to make.
I think you're 100% right. And, I think there is like a big epidemic of who moved my cheese in higher ed. And, I think that you make a really great point that, the idea of ownership feels exclusive. And exclusivity is really antithetical to how a lot of people in higher ed think, which I understand. So the idea of we all have a part to play. We all have responsibilities, things that we're, mindful of. But the other thing that I always emphasize is like, I feel like just, kind of zooming out, like a lot of, people, like they don't know who runs the website. They don't know what the guidelines are. They don't know why certain things go on the homepage and some certain things don't. Like I'm always a huge advocate of like, be transparent, like go to faculty senate, like put it on the internal email, like, hey guys, here's the criteria for the new homepage. We do X, Y, and Z, and here's why. Go read more about it. Like demystify the process, build connections and relationships. And, it's like everything is relationships. And, as things get more complicated and new technologies and, like legacy, sort of mistakes come back to haunt us, or like, oh my God, like, it's always gonna be something. And we're going to be better equipped to deal with whatever it is if we have good partnerships in place with the academic side, with IT, with whomever, with marketing folks at the schools, like whatever it is, we'll be better able to pivot and go, okay, well, what do we do about it? if we had those partnerships in place. So that's just like a general rule of thumb is like, don't be a silo, build the bridges. And things like this, like, and that's just a content that, like, there's gonna be stuff over there where you're like, that's over there and I don't own that. But can I create a partnership with the person who does? And can I say, well, I'm the steward of the web and you have some web that is misaligned to what we're trying to do. Can I work with you to bring us all into alignment, make your job easier and not have you maintain this thing that's like off base? Like, everything would be improved if people worked at that outreach more.
This episode is brought to you by Encora Connect, built with Element 451. If you've ever felt like your institution has more student data than you know what to do with, Encora Connect was built for exactly that problem. It brings together Encora's data science with EduVenture's research, insights on nearly 8 million prospective students nationwide, with Element 451's AI native CRM and Bolt agent engine. That means predictive model scores, student mindsets, parent emails, and funnel insights don't just sit in a report somewhere. They flow directly into your CRM, where Bolt agents act on them in real time. No CSV exports, no manual handoffs, no switching between 5 different systems. It's enrollment intelligence and agentic AI working together in one connected experience. To see what that looks like for your institution, head to element451.com. I want everybody who's listening, like please, building relationships with people across campus is the most fundamental thing you can do to make your job easier. It just is. If you have a relationship where you can pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey, like, that is going to make the challenges that you butt up against so much easier. And if you're in the comms office, whether you're on the quote unquote web team or not, being understanding that from a Marcom perspective, you're a steward of the public perception of the institution. You're a steward of, the how it shows up in search engines, how it shows up in AI searches, all of that. But then also understanding that it is not just you that plays a role in that, and that you need to have relationships in order to play that role well. I feel like I just really wish people got that a little bit more and understood, like, governance becomes easy if you have a relationship with somebody where you can call them.
Yeah, 100%. It's the first step, I feel, and do it now before there's a crisis.
I think I've talked about this before, but my in my last campus job, my AVP for marketing went and had coffee in his first couple of weeks with the AVP over facilities. And I was like, what a strange place to start. And he was like, no, in my experience, they're putting up signs on campus without touching base with us. They're like approving color palettes for buildings. And I want him to have my phone number and my face and who I am drilled into his brain, so that when he's thinking, oh, I need to put a sign up, I better call, I'm not going to mention the person's name, but I'm going to call this person and say, hey, do you want to take a look at the sign I'm about to put up? And I'm like, okay, you're brilliant. That's really smart. I should say, I'm saying he's brilliant. It's Christian Ponce. Brilliant thing to think through, right? Like, being able to, like, even if it's somebody that you don't need to interact with today, so like you might tomorrow.
Yeah. And that goes to like the demystifying point I mentioned earlier. It's like enlightening the AVP facilities, like, oh, I care about the signs, and I could be a part of that and help that in this way. And I'm sure that that person learned about something in facilities where it's like, oh, like I could help with that. Like, I could be aware of that. Like, it goes both ways. So totally, it's awesome.
I'm curious about your thoughts on. Sometimes I hear people say, well, we're gonna be doing a redesign next year, so we'll just wait for that to do this content work. What are your thoughts on that?
It never happens. it doesn't happen, because I think people, you look at the new website like, wow, this is great, and the main nav is better, and it's amazing, but and I've been on these projects where it's like either it's not scoped or the client doesn't want to do it or whatever, but you don't do that hard work, because a lot of these problems live in department sites and school sites, which often are not meaningfully touched by these website redesign projects beyond like a new skin, like a new design. right?
Mm-hmm.
The hard IA work, the hard kind of content auditing work is happening at the top level.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's often not where a lot of these debt issues lie.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm wary of, it's like, I don't think that redesign is really going to do that much, because it's often just kind of skimming the surface and not working at the ecosystem level, or not digging deep into like the weird corners of the web, like the departments and the microsites and all that stuff. And it's like, like when guests come over, you kind of like shove everything in your closet and you're like, look at my beautiful house. I think that's what a lot of website redesign projects are like, where you're like, wow, this is like amazing. Like, look at this beautiful, room that I did. And, but if you open a closet, like it's a nightmare. And, but people are going to end up going there because they're going to need something, and it's going to be a huge turnoff.
Yeah.
And, redesigns are often paired with like, brand revamps and things like that. And, nothing is going to like, deflate your brand more than someone having like a crappy web experience. And they're gonna be like, well, this place, they don't have their act together. It's like, well, there goes $500,000, like, because
Right?
of this like crappy web. Like, it's true. And it's like, think about brand credibility and reputation, all these things that you invest so much money and time in shoring up. And if you have, but people need random information. If they come to you and you lead them astray, or you don't answer it, or it's from 2021, it's like, ugh, these guys,
Yep. Like if you still have COVID information up on your website, like just go to your website and search for COVID. You I think you have a problem.
That's where to start. You asked earlier where to start. That's where to start. Start
Right.
there.
Right? Like all those COVID guidelines. Right. Well, you're talking about these beautiful websites. And then I think of that episode of Friends where they open up like Monica's closet and everything falls out on them, like bowling balls and like hula hoops and all this stuff. Like, please, if you ever come to my house, do not open the junk drawers. They're dangerous. And there's about 48 of them. But I also like this whole idea of waiting until a website redesign. If you have ever had a leisurely website redesign, please email me, because I have never talked to anyone who's not like, we're under a time crunch, we have a lot of pressure. And sort of by the end, you're doing the thing that I do when I clean my house, which is like, oh, shoot, rub my hand across the counters and into the junk drawer and shut the drawer and forget it happened. And I think that happens way more than we like to admit.
And it's content. The stuff that's getting jammed in the closets is content.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the new logo. It's not the new color scheme. It's not the
Mm-hmm.
new like cool component that goes woo. It's the content. And that's the thing that is often not accounted for in those projects. And people are like, oh crap, this is still bad. Golly, how'd that happen? And it's like, well, because there was no plan. Like
Yeah.
the plan stopped here. There's all this that's below the line.
So we talked about like what's that first junk drawer you open potentially being your COVID. Like go look and see if you still have that up there. What are some other junk drawers that you think probably most schools have that they need to peek open a little bit?
Again, like I said, I think that those easy wins are like kind of like the news and events. Like
Mm-hmm.
that might seem like, oh, like out of sight, out of mind, like no one cares, but it's out there, it's findable, it can create confusion, and it's easy enough to get rid of it. I think understanding what, if you have a subdomain problem, what those subdomains are, and again, like, identifying things that you can kind of cut across. I think department sites, like I think the more decentralized you get, like kind of like the outer rings of the solar system, it's like, whoo, like what's like there's less gravity, like we don't know what's happening over there. I feel like that, there's stuff out there that can be a challenge because it's, people just kind of doing their best. Like the people who are managing those sort of like outer sites, those outlying sites are you're getting farther away from like website expertise, and they're just kind of doing their best, right? So I think that can be a huge challenge. Those are some of the areas where you might see, PDFs, pages, random sites, like, God forbid, it's like the art department is like, oh, this design does not match our beautiful aesthetic sensibilities. We're going to launch, collegeartdepartment.com. And it's like, oh God, like that's also a problem. Like that's part of it. Right. So
You're making me twitch. Like I
I'm
had that exact
sorry.
thing. Like,
The
oh,
number,
no.
it's always the art department. Sorry, art department people out there.
Yeah, it was like, well, we don't want these fonts. Like, well, they're hard coded into the CMS. That's what the fonts are going to be, but we don't want them. Like,
Don't know what to tell you.
but there are ample solutions for you to build a personal website that you can have whatever fonts you want on it, but it can't be ours. I'm curious, when you come in and you're working with clients, like, are you doing content audits for them, or what are you doing with your clients?
I think the first thing I'm always trying to do is like, before even talking about the website, is be like, what's your deal? Like, who are you? What are you trying to be? And really just rooting myself and aligning myself to like their need and their mission and their strategy. Because I could certainly go in and do a content audit, like, 5 seconds after saying hello, and start that work and draw a lot of valuable insights about the state of the content and things to do. But I think having a strategic kind of lens for that work is more valuable and going to yield stronger insights about what's serving you well and what isn't, and what's worth keeping but improving, and what's worth sort of getting rid of, and all of those things. Having that foundation set at the beginning is hugely important, where I'm not even asking questions about the website. And often the first questions I'm asking about the website are going to be more about the governance of it. So it's like, okay, who are you? What are you doing? What are you trying to do? What are your goals? Okay, like, how is this managed? Like, I haven't even looked at the website yet. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, how is this how is this happening? And getting those insights. So I feel like, and then from there it can be doing sort of an ecosystem level assessment, kind of be like, what all do you have and what state is it in? And the thing I'm really looking for in those areas is like really truly efficiency. Like, there's so much inefficiency in terms of, people maintaining old content, systems that are, sites and other things that are like, consuming resources and money. No one has money. Why are we wasting money? Or like at a site level, like doing a comprehensive sort of crawl and audit and looking at the content, both against sort of like standard, like, what's the readability? Like, is it accessible? But also like, is this aligned to your brand? Is this supporting, is this speaking to that audience? Is this reflecting who you are? And part of that intake also, I should say, would be like understanding the brand, like your identity and all of that. So a lot of times, like, I'm coming in, I'm doing these kind of like, broad assessments and making recommendations that are at the content level, like, site mapping and things like that. But also I think a lot of that effort is, I won't say wasted, but you're not getting the most out of it unless you're also thinking about the underlying process. Like, how is this being maintained? Like the governance pieces, the editorial process, like the publishing work, like all that stuff. It's like, we can improve this, but it's just going to turn to crap, really soon, unless we also fix these underlying challenges in terms of how things, the governance of it and the publishing process and all that. Those are things that I'm focused on when I'm sort of working with clients, where it's like, yeah, we're here to fix a website, but honestly, it's more about the organization. So much I think flows from the soundness of the organization. And you can have a small team. I'm not saying like everyone needs to hire 10 people, because that's not realistic, but okay, you only have a person and a half or 2 people. What can we let go of? What can we do less of? What can we do differently? How can we change the governance so we can actually tap those comms people at the schools who currently don't do anything web related? Like, could we do something? Can we get creative here? Right. So, I think that the organizational piece of it is also a huge consideration. And that's where I think a lot of like the, as we're thinking about like the ongoing maintenance and like building this into a habit, and not just sort of like every 5 years we panic and freak out. I could create processes all day and say, here, do this, and here's a checklist and whatever. But it's that hard work of thinking about the organization, who's doing what are they empowered to do? What are they trained to do? And then can we trim the scope of what they have to manage to be realistic and aligned to what the institution and the users actually need?
This reminds me of the work I do when people ask me to do an org assessment, and they're looking, they expect an org chart at the end. And that may be what they get, but there's it's more than just who reports to whom, who approves somebody else's vacation, who signs off on somebody else's time. It's
Mhm.
like, how does work flow through the department? Who's empowered to make what decisions? What are the swim lanes? Who's responsible for what? Are those overlaps, and who has final say in those overlapping things? How do they intersect with each other? Because if your department is reinventing the wheel on every project, you're creating these massive bottlenecks of pain points. It's just constant pain points, because
Mhm.
reinventing the wheel is hard. And I think you could have a completely flat org chart with everybody just loosey goosey, but if you had that other stuff together, it wouldn't matter. Like it
Mhm.
Because people would know who's responsible for what, where does the authority lie, where does the empowerment lie. And I love connecting that to the web too, and the governance
Yeah.
of the web. People want that clarity. Well, what can I do? I just talked to a friend today who was complaining about her college's website. She's a dean at a school. It's abhorrent. I'll send it to you later, Georgie. But she's like, I'm like, well, I'd love to like talk through like what you could, just pro bono as a friend, like what are some changes you could make, but what
Mhm.
authority do you have to make changes? And she's like,
Yep.
I have no idea. I have no idea who I talk to, where I go through. And I think that's a problematic, that a senior leader, a dean, doesn't know
Yeah.
who runs it.
She's looking out, being like, "Who do I talk to change this?" And probably people who actually do on the website are like, "Gosh, wish the dean would give me some direction."
Yes,
Right. And not
yeah.
not to knock the dean, but just the fact that people are disconnected in these
Mm-hmm.
roles. And it's not about reporting structure. It's just about the clarity. I think it's the perfect word for it. And people like, my job is X, and to do my job, I need you to do this and you to tell me that. And just
Mm-hmm.
outlining those roles and responsibilities and how people interact to get the job done. It might not be my manager, might not be someone who's not even on my team, but that's the person who I rely on to fulfill my role. And having
Mm-hmm.
that defined and laid out and having it sustainable to the organization, like, it's huge. And people just want, you're right, people just want clarity. It's like, just tell me what to do
Yes.
and make it reasonable and I'll do it. Like, and tell me how to do it, and it's fine. But right now I'm just in the dark. And
Yeah.
it's like, let's just like shed some light.
I just had coffee with a friend who quit her job with no other job lined up, because she felt that there was just this complete lack of transparency about what was going on, and she was constantly being reorged with
Ugh.
no reasons why, no explanations, just now you report over here, now you report over
Mhm.
there, 5 reorgs in 18 months, and it was just too much. People just
Yeah.
want to go to work and know what their job is, and
Mhm.
what the parameters are of the work that they do, and putting them in situations where there's just a complete lack of clarity around that. It's so stressful, and there's so many other things to stress us out. Let's
Yeah.
not have that be it.
And doing that upfront work to sort of like create that clarity gets rid of those future bottlenecks or the churn of overhead of like, what do I do? And I'm emailing around and I don't know what's going on. Like, you're doing that work up front, creating the clarity, and everyone has their sort of like, you wind them up and let them go, right? Everyone sort of fits into that process. And you head, and then if the organization changes, like there's a reduction in force or something happens, you have to revisit it. It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
like this happened, like now how do we work together? Okay, we're gonna
Mm-hmm.
tweak this, tweak that. Okay, carry on. Right. It's a fluid thing. It's dynamic. It's not like, just, do it once or whatever. So
Yeah.
that the clarity is so huge.
Yeah. I'm so Georgie, you're not on a campus now, so I'm expecting something good here. What is your hottest higher ed take?
Oh, you're not gonna like it.
Oh no. Okay.
It's about AI.
Okay.
So I'm really exposing myself here, but I'm a skeptic, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely on the skeptical end of things.
Mm-hmm.
And as a skeptic, I'm going to tell all the leaders and folks out there listening that if you have a skeptic, don't be like, oh, you got to get on the train or get off. Like, embrace that, because the skeptic's
Mm-hmm.
going to ask good, hard questions about what are we doing, why are we doing it, how are we doing it, like what is the what is the trade off, like what is happening, and that's going to help. Like, all technology, all new technology, emerging technology needs someone to ask hard, annoying questions to make it
Mm-hmm.
better, to
Yes.
make the process better, to make it more effective, to make it more worthwhile. Because there's always going to be trade offs, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you don't have somebody who's like, why are we doing it that way? Or why did we do this thing? Don't silence that person. That perspective is hugely valuable. And I think when it comes to AI, there's obviously been like, and you've done a lot of work on this. Like there's a lot to be gained from thinking about how to use technologies like that to make things more efficient, to,
Mm-hmm.
streamline processes and things like that. But I think, especially thinking about within institutions of higher education, when you have the liabilities of implicit bias, of
Mm-hmm.
violated copyright, environmental impact, and all those things touch on elements that are core to the mission of so many institutions in terms of being non-discriminatory and sustainable and upholding scholarship and things like that. And there's a lot of conflict of interest built into that. So I think my hot take is that I think we're over indexing a little bit on it. I personally feel that things are that there's going to be a little bit of a bubble burst,
Mm.
and that it's not going to be the end all be all that some portray it to be, and it's not going to be the way everything gets done from now on. But at the very least, I would encourage thoughtfulness and to listen to that skeptic on your team who's like, because I think that having that voice be heard and have a seat at the table is going to make whatever happen, because it's here, right? Like it's going to be here in some fashion, and it's going to help make whatever this becomes, whatever the use of AI becomes in our work, is going to make it better by pushing and testing and helping through those hard questions, make it better for everybody.
I don't hate that at all. I don't
Oh, okay.
even really disagree with it. Like I would say like my perspective is similar, but I would throw a little twist in that I think there's a lot of conversation about jobs being able to be replaced with AI. And I don't think that higher ed has the infrastructure, whether from a data infrastructure, an organizational structure, infrastructure, policies, legal thing. I don't think higher ed is in any position to actually replace a single job with AI at all. And I
I would
don't
agree
think
with
the
you.
AI is good enough to replace a job. Even if you had all of those things, I don't think it's good enough to do that. And I would add on to your hot take that I'm afraid that AI is going to add to that content debt because it's so
Mm,
easy to create content, but it's so easy to create bad content, like
yeah.
really awful bad content. And that's where I think like the training and the things like that are really essential for people to understand that creating content's actually not a great use of AI. Um, there's
Yep.
there's a lot of things that like for me like brainstorming and being able to like make sense of my disconnected notes. I do a lot of voice notes, like make this
Mm-hmm.
into something that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That has a lot of efficiency for me. But like writing content, it's the amount of work you have to do to make it usable. You might as well just write it yourself.
I just wrote my first set of governance recommendations that had a section, a policy on generative AI for marketing content, and I've done a lot of looking at other schools, as more have created sort of like Marcom focused policies and guidelines for use of AI and things like that. And there are some that are like, here's how to use it to create content. I'm like, like I feel like, I think my policy was definitely like, yeah, you might use it for, sort of idea mapping or outlining or things like that, but do not use it to generate content. Do not
Mm-mm.
publish fully AI generated content. Review, verify, verify, verify. Like,
Mhm.
like it's going back to the point about like brand and reputation and credibility. It's like the margin of error is still so high that you can't rely on that at all. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, there's so many things that it can do that's useful, and there's so many things it can do that's absolutely not something I feel like we should be doing. And if you're like creating photos for your website with I think you're going to be in some real trouble when with student reactions to it, because I think
Mm-hmm.
the I know of an institution that published and then like credited it as like ChatGPT generated this image, and students were like, "We're not supposed to use it in our coursework, but you're using it to generate pictures of fake students for the website. What do you mean?" like, what do you mean? Like,
yeah, how did we go from like authenticity is king to like photo credit chat GPT? And like I have a 13-year-old, and like we'll be walking like in the subway or something, and we'll see like an advertisement that's just like, I don't even know if it's AI generated. It's just like, I mean, like bad or gaudy graphic design, and
yeah.
she's like, "Ugh, it's AI."
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that there's like that sense of like, it's again, it degrades the brand. It reduces your credibility.
Yeah.
And that whole thing that we've been saying for years, it's like the research shows that percent of students, they crave authenticity. Like that hasn't changed, and now there's like
Mm-hmm.
a new way to create inauthentic content very easily. And my kid in a couple of years is going to be looking at college high school like, oh, it's
Yeah.
AI. The
Well,
eyes rolling so far back in the head.
and that generation's serious about it too. Like there's,
Oh yeah.
yeah. And for not just authenticity reasons, but also like the job market and all of the things that are being impacted by the environment, all of it. So I just think that being really thoughtful and intentional about where you deploy it and how you deploy it,
Mm.
and I think there's a lot of potential uses for folks in higher ed, but I would 100% agree with you that like that you have to do it with great intentionality. Like there's,
Yep.
yeah. Well, this is great. Where can people find you if they want to join the Georgy Cohen fan club?
I post letters to my fan club on LinkedIn very frequently. I'm also this fall, I'm going to be at the Digital conference in Pittsburgh, and I've not bought my ticket yet, but my plan is to be at AMA in Denver, AMA Higher Ed. So, but I'm around. You can find me, message me. I love chatting with people about stuff. So happy to, just georgycohen.com. You can read all about my whatever it is I do.
I
All
love
these
it.
things that I just talked about.
All the things. And listeners, as always, you can find me on LinkedIn at Jaime Hunt, JaimeHunt. You can also find me on my website at solvehighered.com, and you can find my book at heartoverhypebook.com. And I always love hearing from listeners. If you have a question, if you have a guest suggestion, if you're like, I'm real smart and I have things to say, pitch yourself for the show as well. And thank you so much for listening, and let's go bust some silos.
Woohoo!
Listeners, can I ask you a quick favor? If you enjoy this show, take a moment to give it a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'm a type A eldest daughter, so positive feedback is basically my love language. I also genuinely love hearing from listeners. You can find me at LinkedIn at Jaime Hunt. That's JaimeHunt. And yes, I am named after the Bionic Woman. You can also find me at solvehighered.com. Say hello, share a thought, pitch an idea. Don't be shy. I genuinely love hearing from you.